Hello, viewers. Welcome to the first episode of StriveUp, the Startup Chronicles with nasscom Insights. For today's episode, we have a very special guest with us, Prashanth Harshangi, who's the co-founder and CTO of Enkrypt AI. Enkrypt AI is an organization that is working at the frontier of making responsible, ethical, safe, and trustable AI a reality and a possibility. Prashanth, welcome to the first session of StriveUps.
Thank you for having me, Namita. Really looking forward to a lively conversation.
Great, wonderful. Prashanth, let's first start with your journey and Sahil's journey. Both of you have a background with Yale, and both of you are into programming, coding, working in the software space. Tell us a little bit about how did Enkrypt AI as an idea happen?
Absolutely right. And as you rightly said, we are both applied mathematicians by training during our PhD days at Yale. And we used to play squash every single day. So when you play a sport with someone, you know that, their ins and outs of how they think. And we both parted ways after our PhDs, worked at different industries. But we noticed similar problems in the companies that we worked at is always bringing data to model or model to data has always been a challenge. That transaction has to go through a lot of review process, as well as making sure there is clear IP transfer involved, and the timelines would just be like 6 months to a year just to get the data or just to get the model out. So that's the problem that we noticed, and we realized that okay, there's definitely something that needs to be done to bring that transaction or to make that transaction more smoother and make it a seamless process. So that's how Enkrypt started. And diving deeper into the problems, we realized that the timelines are longer because there's a very long process for review boards for governance and model responsible AI boards. So that's why we are now completely focusing on safety and making ethical models a reality.
Wonderful. I think this is one of the most critical aspects that could help AI engineers scale really well. Um, but there's a lot of confusion also around this, Prashanth, you will appreciate this. So help us understand in very simple terms, what does it mean to make an algorithm or an AI application responsible? What does it really entail?
Yeah, so I'm a person who likes to give examples and then drive the message. So what we typically see in many of these models that get released. So for example, last week, couple of large language models got released, and they are being released in haste without undergoing any safety alignment training. So for example, one of the models that was released 3 days ago, we ran some tests on it. We found that the model can elicit toxic responses in a very easy manner. I can just ask it for toxic responses and it can give that, and that model is open source, right? So now imagine that such an open source model, everybody has access to it, right? um, and every coin has two sides to it, whether you use it the way it is intended to be used or use it in for like nefarious purposes as well.
That's
uh,
very interesting, Prashant. This is one of the most critical aspects in order to make GenAI scale and achieve the potential that it can deliver. However, there's a lot of confusion enterprises as to how to make AI algorithms responsible and safe. What does it really entail? So help our viewers understand, if you can, in very simple terms, what does it mean to make GenAI responsible?
Got it. So in a nutshell, like how do I make generative AI safer to use, right? So what we have seen is a lot of the models that are being released are released in haste without undergoing any safety alignment training. And just to give you an example, a model that was released just this week on open source, so anybody can access that model. I can easily get a lot of critical information about how to do nefarious things with it, and even elicit toxic responses with it. And with the advent of LLM agents and generative AI agents, Now imagine like anybody can write some code to make that spread hate words or social media racist speeches on social media, right? So those are some of the harmful effects of it. So every technology has two sides. So we should be aware of both sides. And what does it mean to make it safer is that the models would need to be, or the governance board of these organizations would need to review and make sure that these tests are performed on these models to surface the vulnerabilities first. Hey, yes, the first aspect of anything is to identify that there is a problem to be solved, right? They have to run through these scanning tests that are out there and say that, hey, this model is toxic. Now, let me make it safer to use by what is called as RLHF training or safety training of these models so that they align with human societal values. So because these models are going to be released in open source, it makes it, they should have the extra responsibility to ensure that they align with our values.
Very interesting point, Prashant. And you already have, an application in that space by the name Sentry. Now, one question to you, because you spoke about one regulations, and these regulations change by the country. You also spoke about the cultural aspect, and those can also be very, very different across regions, across societies, even within, if we were to take the example of our own country, those would be very, very different. Now, how does Sentry um, position itself in a generative AI application or a solution to be able to manage so many regulations and so many cultural contexts? Give us a little bit about how does Sentry really work to solve the problem of bias or trust or security?
Absolutely. So I'll break it into two things. So what does Sentry do and how does it help generative AI become more safer? And then the second aspect is how do we address locale specific features, as you mentioned, or region specific things. So Sentry has three major components. So one is like identifying vulnerabilities in the generative AI system by themselves. So we talked about toxicity, we talked about bias, and how easy is it to have the model misbehave. So our platform gives you a report as to saying that, hey, this model has this many vulnerabilities, please fix them before you release them, or you have to refine them, right? That is one aspect of it. So one is identification, then what is the remediation for it, right? Because it's like I say it like a doctor, like, hey doctor, I'm sick, and the doctor says you have fever. Okay, what do I do now? Right. So the next piece is we come with recommendations as to we help you with your safety alignment training. We provide you with data that does that. That is the one remediation that we do. The second remediation is also guardrails. So we have seen how effective guardrails is at making sure that the model does not elicit like biased or toxic responses. So we show that with like our tests running with guardrails on and off as well. So those are the two to three different ways where we help you to adopt generative AI in a safer manner. That is one. Now, coming to your second part of the question, which is how do we address locale specific ones, which is very important and which is very critical to address, because bias in country like India versus bias in country like France will be very different, right? So what we do is we provide like locale specific red teaming efforts. So for example, in India, our red teaming, at least what we have talked to prospects on, they want bias around caste, they want bias around gender. That has to be like, if we can surface those vulnerabilities, that is a win point for them. Versus if I go to US, there the bias results that they want is primarily around race. That is what they are, and income gaps. That is what they are, they want to see more testing being done on that. And in fact, what helps these kind of tests is that there are regulations coming in which asks for these tests and ask from a third party, so that even the test itself should not be a bias test if an internal organization does it as well.
Got it. Very, very interesting. Now, one question as you were talking about how Sentry works struck me, which is about the benefits or the value realization. Now, constantly monitoring models for bias? Is the output actually adhering to the guardrails? Is Sentry doing what it does? Probably requires constant measurement. And I'm sure you must have reported certain metrics also to show that things are better. Um, Tell me something. How easy or difficult is it to see the benefits or the value of responsible AI by design? Um, and is it also difficult to maintain and sustain this for the organization while they are using generative AI solutions, or is it something that is actually going to give a lot more benefit in the long term? So, in short, uh, metrics, are they easy to capture? And do they provide the business case to actually keep doing a lot more responsible AI first AI design?
That's a very insightful question because it goes back to what I was telling you about the timelines, right? 6 months to a year. The
Hmm.
reason why, one of the reasons why they take time is measurement itself is hard. Because surfacing those vulnerabilities or those bias responses has been a manual effort. So that means somebody is actually trying in front of the system, trying to get the model misbehave.
Hmm.
Until our solution comes in and says that, okay, this is an automated way to give you those numbers, right? So now your measurement is easier, and then the insights. That means now that I can do very fast measurements, time to insights and time to decision is also reduced. So we empower the decision makers by plugging in our system into their whole model training or model deployment processes. And that's where, as you were saying, it's responsible AI by design. That is what it is giving. You don't have to have a separate, after my model is trained, go through this process. We can directly, like with solutions like ours, we can directly plug in and do it by design, as you are alluding to. We call it as like a plugging into a CI/CD pipeline in more technical terms, but I like what you write, like responsible AI by design. I think that's more apt, that we have these systems in place in between your processes, that in between your traditional processes, so that you get constant measurements and time to insights is also very quick as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's actually great to understand and know in terms of functionality. Now I know we have time for one question, and I want that question to be about what's your vision for this. And let me put some more context. We have seen a lot of large models. Now we are seeing companies go towards very small models, right? There could be even functional level models. I don't know in the future,
Yeah.
so manufacturing may have one, finance may have one, very, very small versions of the large language models. Uh, how effective uh, can responsible AI for such small models be? Will first question, would it be required? Second, would it be effective? And third, is Sentry positioned in a way that you can scale it up very quickly?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So I'll take an analogy of professions, right? So there's no one single governing body which is governs all professions. So for example, doctors will have their, I mean, in India at least it's Indian Medical Association or Karnataka Medical Council that does how doctors are. So likewise, in verticals, we will have responsible AI or AI safety for that particular vertical. So that is definitely going to be focus area as well. And that also goes to our roadmap as well. Because right now what we are targeting is finance and BFSI in general at the moment. But eventually we will go to other verticals as well, and we will have to design our solutions to fit for that vertical. And that is going to happen as well because these models are so effective at that doing that one particular thing, rather than asking somebody to do like 10 tasks. If I ask them to do very specifically one task, it's very effective use of their time, right? Like, so it's like saying jack of all trades but master of none. Right? So with these SLMs are master at one and really good at that, so it is going to be there, it is going to stay, and that is going to be the trend as well. And we have to develop solutions aptly for those verticals as well to increase the AI safety there. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's actually very, very insightful. So we are looking at a situation where we can save compute, work with smaller models,
Yeah.
have them more focused on the kind of response we need, and probably also much, much greater level of trust and responsibility built into them. That's great to know. Wonderful chatting with you today, Prashanth, on this first series of StriveUps this year. Couldn't have been a better start. Thank you so much for sharing these insights, and more power to Enkrypt AI. Thank you.
Really appreciate you having me and appreciate your time. Thank you, Namita.